Marcus Chen stood at the edge of the Galactic Academy's training grounds, watching as his fellow cadets paraded their companion beasts with obvious pride. The sight made his stomach twist with familiar embarrassment. Around him, creatures of legend stalked, flew, and prowled, each one a testament to their owner's status and potential. Zarak, the Vorthan prince, commanded a massive void stalker that seemed to absorb light itself. The beast stood 12 feet tall, its obsidian hide rippling with barely contained energy. Its 6 red eyes tracked every movement in the arena, and when it moved, reality seemed to bend slightly around its form. The other cadets gave it a wide berth, their own creatures showing instinctive deference. Not far away, Kethlos of the Meridian Empire directed his Thunder Drake through aerial maneuvers. The dragon-like creature's wingspan stretched nearly 50 feet, its scales crackling with bioelectric energy. Each beat of its wings created small thunderclaps, and the air around it shimmered with electromagnetic fields. Lightning danced between its claws as it performed complex aerial patterns, each movement precise and deadly. Even Yixta, generally considered the weakest among their class, commanded respect with her crystalline serpent. The translucent creature moved like liquid glass, its body refracting light into hypnotic patterns. Though only 8 feet long, it could phase through solid matter at will and generate sonic frequencies that could shatter most known materials. Then there was Marcus, standing alone with Luna. Luna appeared to be nothing more than an ordinary earth wolf. She was beautiful, certainly. Her coat was a rich silver gray that caught the light in pleasing ways, and her amber eyes held an intelligence that seemed almost human. But in a galaxy where companion beasts were living weapons of mass destruction, where they could manipulate time, space, energy, and matter itself, Luna looked pathetically mundane. "Still bringing your pet dog to combat training, human?" Zarak's voice carried the particular brand of condescension that only royalty seemed to master. His translator rendered the clicks and whistles of Vorthan's speech into perfect galactic standard, but it couldn't hide the amusement in his tone. Marcus felt his jaw tighten, but he kept his expression neutral. Over the past 2 years at the Academy, he had learned that reacting to their taunts only made things worse. "Luna is registered as my companion beast according to Academy protocols," he replied evenly. This statement was met with the harmonious laughter that erupted whenever Marcus tried to defend his choice. The sound came from dozens of different species, each expressing amusement in their own unique way. The Vorthans created a sound like breaking glass, the Meridians produced a musical humming, and the insectoid klaxons clicked their mandibles in rapid succession. "Protocols," Kethlos repeated, his translator adding a mocking edge to the word. "The Academy accepts any creature that demonstrates basic sentience and forms a genuine bond with its chosen partner. Your species really knows how to exploit loopholes." The Thunder Drake settled beside its master, electricity still arcing between its fangs. Its massive head turned toward Luna, and for a moment Marcus thought he saw something like confusion in its reptilian eyes. Even the magnificent beast seemed puzzled by Luna's presence among them. "It's not exploitation," Marcus said, reaching down to run his fingers through Luna's thick fur. She leaned into his touch, her tail wagging slightly. "Luna chose me just like your creatures chose you." "Chose you for what?" Yixta interjected, her serpentine form undulating with what Marcus had learned to recognize as nagging amusement. "To fetch sticks, to warm your feet at night. My shard can cut through battleship hulls." As if to demonstrate, the crystalline serpent suddenly became solid and struck the ground. The reinforced training surface, designed to withstand the attacks of planet-killer beasts, developed a spider web of cracks radiating out from the impact point. The other cadets stepped back instinctively. Luna, however, simply sat down and yawned. The gesture was so perfectly timed and so utterly dismissive that it caught everyone off guard. For a moment, the training ground fell silent except for the ambient hum of the Academy's energy shields. Then the laughter returned, twice as loud as before. "Did you see that?" Zarak managed between his glass-breaking chuckles. It yawned. In the face of a demonstration of raw destructive power, the human's pet yawned. Marcus felt heat rise in his cheeks, but he couldn't deny that Luna's timing had been unfortunate. She had a habit of appearing completely unimpressed by displays of power, which only reinforced everyone's belief that she was nothing more than a common animal who had somehow tricked the Academy's screening process. "Attention, cadets!" The voice of Instructor Vexmer boomed across the training ground, immediately silencing all conversation. The massive Thorian moved toward them with ground-shaking steps, his rocky exterior scarred from centuries of battle. As one of the Academy's most respected combat instructors, his mere presence commanded absolute respect. "Today we begin advanced combat scenarios," Vexmer announced, his words causing the ground to vibrate slightly. "You will face simulated battles against various galactic threats. Your performance will determine your final rankings and assignment preferences upon graduation." The instructor's multifaceted eyes swept over the assembled cadets, lingering for a moment on each companion beast. When his gaze reached Luna, Marcus saw what he had come to recognize as barely concealed disappointment. "The scenarios have been calibrated to challenge beings of your capabilities," Vexmer continued. "Each test will push your companion bonds to their absolute limits. Some of you may discover that your partnerships are not as strong as you believed." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. He had managed to pass every previous exam through careful strategy and Luna's surprising agility, but these advanced scenarios were designed to test raw power and combat effectiveness. Everything he had worked for over the past 2 years suddenly felt fragile and uncertain. "Cadet Marcus Chen," Vexmer called out, and Marcus felt every eye in the training ground focus on him. "You will demonstrate first." A collective murmur ran through the group. It was highly unusual for the weakest cadet to go first in any demonstration. Marcus suspected this was Vexmer's way of getting the embarrassment out of the way early, allowing the real cadets to showcase their abilities without the distraction of watching a human fail. "Yes, instructor," Marcus replied, his voice steadier than he felt. He looked down at Luna, who gazed back at him with those impossibly intelligent amber eyes. For just a moment he could have sworn he saw something there, not just intelligence, but knowledge, as if Luna understood far more about their situation than she had ever let on. "The scenario is a Class 7 planetary defense," Vexmer announced as the training ground's holographic systems hummed to life around them. "Enemy force consists of 40 Void Hunters, 12 Plasma Titans, and 1 Dreadnought-class command vessel. Standard rules of engagement apply. Begin when ready." Marcus felt his blood turn to ice. A Class 7 scenario was typically reserved for final-year students, and even then only for those with the most powerful companion beasts. Void Hunters were swift, deadly creatures that could phase in and out of normal space. Plasma Titans were living siege engines capable of reducing cities to ash, and a Dreadnought commanded defenses that could withstand orbital bombardment. Around him, the training ground transformed into a war-torn cityscape. Smoke filled the air as buildings crumbled under simulated bombardment. The sound of distant explosions echoed off the walls, and the acrid smell of burning metal assaulted his senses. Emergency sirens wailed in the distance while civilians screamed for help. "This is impossible," he whispered, but Luna simply stood up and stretched as if preparing for a pleasant walk. The first wave of Void Hunters materialized from the smoke like nightmares given form. They stood 8 feet tall on digitigrade legs, their bodies composed of what looked like living shadow wrapped around cores of malevolent energy. Their faces were vaguely humanoid but stretched and distorted, with eyes that burned like stars and mouths full of teeth that seemed to absorb light. They moved with inhuman speed, their forms flickering in and out of visibility as they utilized their ability to partially exist outside normal spacetime. Marcus had studied these creatures extensively. Standard Academy doctrine called for companion beasts capable of energy manipulation or reality alteration to counter their phasing abilities. Luna had neither of those capabilities. The first hunter reached them in seconds, its claws extending into razor-sharp talons that could cut through most armor like paper. Marcus instinctively stepped back, already calculating how quickly he could signal surrender before they were both torn apart. Luna moved. It wasn't the movement of an ordinary wolf, though it appeared to be. She didn't grow larger or sprout energy fields or manifest any of the obvious transformations that marked a true combat companion. She simply moved with a fluid grace that seemed to bend the laws of physics in subtle ways. The Void Hunter's claws swept through empty air as Luna flowed around the attack like water around a stone. Her jaws closed around the creature's throat with surgical precision, and the hunter dissolved into wisps of dark smoke with a sound like breaking glass. Marcus blinked in surprise. He had seen Luna fight before, but never against anything truly dangerous. She had always seemed competent but unremarkable in their training exercises. This was different. This was something else entirely. The remaining Void Hunters attacked as a pack, their forms flickering through multiple dimensions as they sought to overwhelm their targets through sheer numbers. Luna moved through them like a silver bullet, each motion perfectly calculated and devastatingly effective. She didn't fight like an animal. She fought like a mathematician, each action part of an equation that always resulted in her opponent's destruction. Within 30 seconds, the entire first wave was eliminated. Marcus stood frozen in shock as Luna returned to his side, her breathing not even slightly elevated. She sat down and looked up at him with what he could only describe as mild satisfaction, as if she had just completed a routine training exercise rather than impossibly defeating 40 creatures that could have destroyed most Academy graduates. The training ground fell absolutely silent. Even Vexmer's massive form had gone completely still, his rocky features frozen in an expression of disbelief. The other cadets stared with their mouths open, their own powerful companions pressing close to them as if seeking comfort. Then the plasma titans emerged from the smoke. Each titan stood 20 feet tall and was composed entirely of contained plasma held together by magnetic fields. They moved like walking furnaces, their every step leaving molten footprints in the reinforced ground. The air around them shimmered with heat that could melt steel, and their mere presence began to warp the holographic environment. These creatures were living weapons of mass destruction. They could fire plasma bolts capable of punching through capital ship hulls, generate electromagnetic pulses that disabled entire fleets, and survive in the vacuum of space indefinitely. In a real battle, a single plasma titan could level a small city. 12 of them focused their attention on Marcus and Luna. Luna yawned again. This time, nobody laughed. The Titans opened fire simultaneously, filling the air with enough coherent plasma to vaporize a small mountain. The beams converged on the spot where Marcus and Luna stood, creating a miniature star that should have instantly reduced them to their component atoms. But Luna was no longer there. She moved between the plasma bolts like they were gentle rain, her form seeming to exist in multiple places at once. Marcus watched in stunned amazement as his ordinary wolf companion danced through attacks that could have destroyed continents, each movement flowing into the next with impossible grace. When she reached the first Titan, Luna simply touched it. The 20-foot-tall creature of living plasma collapsed into itself and winked out of existence, as if someone had turned off a switch. No explosion, no massive energy discharge, it simply ceased to exist. One by one, the remaining Titans fell to the same inexplicable fate. Each time, Luna would flow through their attacks like smoke, reach them with movements that seemed to ignore distance and momentum, and touch them just once. Each time, they would simply stop being. The training ground had become a graveyard of impossible victories. Marcus realized he was trembling, though whether from fear or amazement, he couldn't tell. Everything he thought he knew about Luna, about their partnership, about his own limitations. It was all crumbling around him like a house of cards in a hurricane. The Dreadnought command vessel materialized above the city, its massive form blotting out the artificial sky. It was a kilometer long and bristled with enough firepower to sterilize planets. Shield generators created overlapping fields of energy that could withstand sustained bombardment from entire fleets. Its AI-driven tactical systems could process millions of variables simultaneously and adapt to any threat in real time. It was, quite simply, one of the most dangerous war machines ever conceived by galactic civilization. Luna looked up at it and tilted her head to one side, as if she were considering an interesting puzzle. Then she did something that made Marcus question his own sanity. She jumped, not the leap of a wolf, or even a wolf enhanced by alien technology. She jumped up and simply kept going up, moving through the air as if gravity were merely a suggestion she chose to ignore. Her form became a silver streak against the false sky as she rose toward the Dreadnought like a guided missile. The massive vessel's defensive systems immediately locked onto her, filling the air with enough destructive energy to glass the surface of a moon. Point defense lasers, plasma cannons, particle beams, gravitational shears, temporal distortion fields. Every weapon in the ship's vast arsenal fired simultaneously in an effort to stop one small wolf. Luna moved through the barrage like it wasn't there. When she reached the Dreadnought's hull, She landed delicately on its armored surface and sat down. For a moment, the massive ship continued firing its weapons into empty space, its targeting systems apparently unable to locate a target that was sitting directly on top of it. Then Luna did something that Marcus would replay in his memory for the rest of his life. She howled. It wasn't the howl of an earth wolf, though it sounded like one. It was something far deeper and more profound, a sound that seemed to resonate with the fundamental frequencies of reality itself. The note hung in the air like a physical presence, beautiful and terrible and utterly alien. The dreadnought began to come apart. Not exploding, not being torn apart by weapons or energy fields. It simply began to disassemble itself at the molecular level, its components separating and drifting away like leaves in an autumn wind. Hull plates, weapon systems, power cores, computational matrices, everything that made up the massive vessel just quietly ceased to hold together. Within minutes, the most powerful war machine in known space had become nothing more than a cloud of harmless debris floating in the artificial atmosphere. Luna jumped down from the disintegrating ship, landing gracefully beside Marcus with her tail wagging, as if she had just performed a particularly clever trick. The training ground's holographic systems shut down, returning them to the sterile white walls of the Academy facility. The smell of smoke and burning metal faded, replaced by the recycled air that always carried a faint metallic tang. Marcus stared at Luna, his mind struggling to process what he had just witnessed. This was the same creature who had spent 2 years appearing to be nothing more than an unusually intelligent pet. The same wolf who had endured countless insults and dismissive comments from his fellow cadets. The same companion who had seemed so ordinary that even he had occasionally wondered if he had made a terrible mistake. "What are you?" he whispered. Luna looked up at him with those amber eyes that suddenly seemed to hold the wisdom of ages, and for just a moment, Marcus could have sworn he heard her voice in his mind. Not speaking, exactly, but communicating in a way that bypassed language entirely. The answer she gave him would haunt his dreams for weeks to come. She was exactly what she appeared to be, a wolf from Earth who had chosen to bond with a human cadet. But she was also something far more ancient and powerful than anything the galaxy had ever imagined. She was a guardian, a protector, a force of nature given form and purpose. And she had been waiting for someone worthy of her true abilities for a very, very long time. The silence in the training ground stretched until it became almost unbearable. Marcus could feel the weight of dozens of eyes staring at him, at Luna, at the impossible thing they had just witnessed. Finally, Instructor Vexmer found his voice. "Class dismissed," he said quietly. "We will discuss this performance at a later time." As the other cadets filed out in stunned silence, their magnificent companion beasts pressed close to them as if seeking reassurance, Marcus remained frozen in place. Luna sat beside him, looking perfectly content and utterly ordinary once again. But Marcus would never be able to see her the same way again. News of Marcus's performance spread through the Academy like wildfire, though the details seemed to change with each telling. By the time evening meal arrived, Luna had supposedly destroyed an entire fleet single-handedly, turned invisible, and breathed plasma fire hot enough to melt adamantine. Marcus sat alone at his usual table in the far corner of the dining hall, mechanically eating his ration while trying to ignore the constant stares and whispered conversations happening around him. Luna lay beneath the table, seemingly oblivious to the attention, though Marcus noticed her ears twitching at sounds too subtle for human hearing. The Academy's dining hall was a massive space designed to accommodate dozens of different species and their various dietary requirements. Crystalline feeding stations lined one wall for the silicon-based lifeforms, while atmospheric chambers allowed gaseous beings to consume their preferred molecular combinations. The air itself was carefully filtered and charged with different energy types to keep everyone comfortable. Despite the diversity, every single being in the hall seemed focused on the human and his wolf. "Mind if we sit here?" Marcus looked up to find Zarak standing beside his table, his usual entourage of sycophants notably absent. The Vorthan prince looked decidedly uncomfortable, his normally pristine appearance somehow disheveled despite his obviously expensive grooming. "It's a free hall," Marcus replied, gesturing to the empty chairs around his table. Zarak sat down carefully, his movements lacking their usual aristocratic grace. For several minutes, neither of them spoke. The prince picked at his meal, some kind of processed protein that shifted colors in response to his bioelectric field, while stealing glances at Luna. "That wasn't normal," Zarek finally said. Marcus almost laughed at the understatement. "No, it wasn't." "I've been trained in combat analysis since I could walk," Zarek continued, his voice unusually quiet. "My tutors included former generals, legendary beast masters, and tactical AI systems with processing power beyond most planets. They taught me to recognize every known form of companion enhancement, every combat technique used by the major species, every possible manifestation of bond amplification." He paused, stabbing his food with unnecessary force. "I've never seen anything like what your wolf did today." Marcus nodded slowly. "Neither have I." "That's the problem, isn't it?" Zarek looked directly at him for the first time since sitting down. "You've been with her for 2 years, and you're telling me you had no idea she could do any of that." The question hit closer to home than Marcus cared to admit. Luna had been his constant companion since their bonding ceremony during his first week at the academy. They had trained together, studied together, even slept in the same quarters. He had thought he knew everything about her: her favorite foods, her preferred resting spots, her subtle expressions and body language. Apparently, he had known nothing at all. "Luna has always been special," Marcus said carefully, "but what happened today?" He shook his head. "I can't explain it." Zarek leaned forward, his expression intense. "My Void Stalker has been acting strangely since the demonstration. It keeps staring in your direction and making sounds I've never heard before. When I tried to form our combat link for evening exercises, it refused to bond. It's never refused before." Around the dining hall, Marcus began to notice similar behaviors. Kethlo sat 3 tables away, apparently trying to calm his thunder drake, which was making distressed electrical sounds and keeping its massive head turned toward Luna. Yixta's crystalline serpent had wrapped itself around her torso in what Marcus recognized as a defensive posture, its translucent form flickering between solid and incorporeal states. Every companion beast in the hall was displaying signs of agitation, confusion, or outright fear. They sensed something, Marcus realized. "The question is what?" Zarek replied grimly. "And why didn't we sense it before?" Their conversation was interrupted by the approach of Instructor Vexmer, whose massive form cast a shadow over their table. The Thorian's rocky features were set in an expression Marcus had learned to recognize as deep concern. "Cadet Chen, your presence is requested in the headmaster's office immediately." Marcus felt his stomach drop. In 2 years at the academy, he had never been called to see Headmaster Krotak. The ancient ethereal was a figure of legend even among the academy's distinguished faculty, a being whose mastery of companion bonding was said to be unmatched in recorded history. "Is Luna," Marcus began. "Your companion will accompany you," Vexmer interrupted. "The headmaster was very specific about that requirement." As Marcus stood to leave, Zarek caught his arm. "Whatever they tell you in there," the prince said quietly, "remember that half the academy saw what happened today. They can't pretend it didn't occur." The walk to the administrative levels felt like the longest journey of Marcus's life. Luna padded beside him, her demeanor as calm as ever, but Marcus noticed that other cadets and instructors moved out of their path with unusual haste. Word had clearly spread beyond the student body. The headmaster's office occupied the highest level of the academy's central tower, its walls made of some transparent material that offered a panoramic view of the surrounding cityscape. During the day, the vista showed the bustling metropolis that had grown up around the academy, filled with beings from across the galaxy who came to study the art of companion bonding. Now, in the evening darkness, the city lights twinkled like stars against a black canvas. Headmaster Krotak floated behind a desk that seemed to be carved from a single massive crystal. The ethereal's form was difficult to focus on directly. He appeared to be made of shifting light and shadow, with features that seemed to change depending on the viewer's angle. Only his eyes remained constant, burning with an inner fire that spoke of eons of accumulated wisdom. "Cadet Marcus Chen," the headmaster's voice resonated directly in Marcus's mind rather than through his ears. "Please sit, and Luna," the burning gaze shifted to the wolf. "It is an honor to finally meet you properly." Luna's tail wagged once, and Marcus could have sworn he saw amusement flicker across the ethereal's shifting features. "You're not surprised," Marcus said, taking the offered chair. It was a statement rather than a question. "Surprised? No," Krodak's form pulsed with what might have been laughter. "Though I confess I had hoped you might discover Luna's true nature under less public circumstances." Marcus felt the last of his certainties crumble. "You've known all along." "I suspected," Krodak corrected gently. "When Luna first arrived with you, she carried certain resonances that suggested she was far more than she appeared. But the Academy's purpose is to foster the bonds between companions and their chosen partners. Forcing revelations rarely leads to strong partnerships." The headmaster gestured, and the office's walls shifted to display what looked like historical records. Images and text in languages Marcus didn't recognize, showing various creatures throughout galactic history. "Tell me, Cadet Chen, what do you know of the Apex Companions?" Marcus shook his head. "I've never heard that term." "Few have," Krodak replied, his form darkening slightly. "They are legendary beings, creatures of such power that their very existence was thought to be mythical. Ancient texts speak of companions who could reshape reality with a thought, who existed outside the normal laws of physics, who chose partners not based on strength or ambition, but on character and potential." The images on the walls shifted, showing what appeared to be battle scenes. Marcus saw creatures that defied description fighting alongside warriors from dozens of different species. In each image, the companions appeared modest, almost mundane, while performing feats that should have been impossible. "The last confirmed Apex companion was recorded over 10,000 years ago," Krodak continued. "They disappeared from the galaxy so completely that most scholars came to believe they were nothing more than folklore, stories told to inspire young beast masters." Marcus looked down at Luna, who was now lying on her side as if taking a nap. "But Luna is an Apex companion, yes." Krodak's burning gaze focused on the apparently sleeping wolf. "Though I suspect she is something even rarer, a true guardian." The title sent a chill down Marcus's spine, though he couldn't explain why. "What's a true guardian?" "Legend speaks of Apex companions who do more than serve their partners," the headmaster explained. "True guardians choose individuals who will face trials that could reshape the fate of entire civilizations. They appear ordinary, even unremarkable, until the moment their partner needs them most." The office fell silent except for the gentle hum of the city below. Marcus stared at Luna, trying to reconcile the image of a universe-shaking legendary being with the wolf who had spent the morning chasing holographic butterflies in their quarters. "Why me?" he finally asked. "I'm not special. I'm not particularly strong or smart or brave. I'm just a human cadet who barely qualified for the academy." Krodak's form brightened with what Marcus now recognized as amusement. That question would be better directed at Luna herself. Apex companions, especially true guardians, have their own criteria for choosing partners. These criteria have never been fully understood by anyone except the guardians themselves. As if summoned by the mention of her name, Luna lifted her head and looked directly at Marcus. For a moment, those amber eyes seemed to hold depths that stretched beyond the boundaries of space and time. Then she yawned, stood up, and padded over to rest her head on his lap. The gesture was so perfectly normal, so utterly dog-like, that Marcus almost laughed despite the gravity of the situation. "There will be complications," Krodak warned, his tone becoming more serious. "News of today's demonstration cannot be contained. Already, communications are being sent to governments, military organizations, and research institutions across the galaxy. Everyone will want to study Luna to understand her abilities to determine if more Apex companions exist." Marcus felt a surge of protective anger. They can't have her. She's not some weapon to be analyzed and exploited. "No," the headmaster agreed. "But neither can her existence be hidden. The galaxy is entering a period of great uncertainty. New threats are emerging from unexplored regions, ancient enemies are stirring, and the balance of power that has maintained peace for millennia is beginning to shift." The images on the walls changed again, showing star charts marked with areas of concern, regions where ships had vanished, where communications had gone dark, where something vast and malevolent seemed to be gathering strength. "Perhaps Luna's appearance at this time is not coincidence," Krodak suggested. "Perhaps she knows something we do not." Luna's head remained on Marcus's lap, but he could feel her attention sharpen at the headmaster's words. Whatever intelligence dwelt behind those amber eyes, it was clearly processing information far beyond what an ordinary wolf should understand. "What happens now?" Marcus asked. "Now you continue your training," Krodak replied. "But under rather different circumstances. Your class standing will be adjusted to reflect your true capabilities, and you will receive additional instruction in matters that few academy students ever encounter." The headmaster gestured again, and a new section of the office revealed itself, a library filled with texts that seemed to pulse with their own inner light. "You will study the histories of the Apex companions, learn what little is known of their abilities and limitations, and prepare for the challenges that Luna's presence suggests are coming." Marcus felt overwhelmed by the sudden transformation of his life. That morning, he had been the Academy's least promising cadet. Now, he was apparently the partner of a legendary being whose very existence could reshape galactic civilization. "There's one more thing," Krodak added, his tone becoming cautionary. "Luna's demonstration today will have attracted attention from interested parties. Not all of them will have benevolent intentions. You should be prepared for attempts to separate you from your companion, to study her against her will, or to eliminate you both as potential threats." The words sent ice through Marcus's veins. "Are you saying we're in danger?" "I'm saying that power of Luna's magnitude never goes unnoticed for long," the headmaster replied gravely. "And there are forces in the galaxy that would kill to possess such power, or to ensure that their enemies do not." Luna finally lifted her head from Marcus's lap, and when she looked at him this time, her expression was perfectly clear. She wasn't concerned about the threats or the attention or the complications that were coming their way. She was ready for them. "Your quarters will be relocated to a more secure section of the Academy," Krodak announced. "And you will be assigned a protection detail, though I suspect Luna makes such precautions largely unnecessary." As if to emphasize the point, Luna yawned again, stretched, and settled back down at Marcus's feet. To anyone watching, she appeared to be nothing more than a contented pet. But Marcus was beginning to understand that, with Luna, appearances were always deceiving. "One last question," Marcus said as they prepared to leave. "In all the legends about Apex companions and true guardians, what happened to their partners? What kind of life am I looking at?" Krodak's form flickered with an emotion Marcus couldn't identify. "That, Cadet Chen, depends entirely on whether you prove worthy of the trust Luna has placed in you." As they walked back through the Academy's corridors toward their new quarters, Marcus noticed that the usual evening bustle had been replaced by an atmosphere of barely contained excitement and fear. Students and instructors alike stepped aside as they passed, their eyes following Luna with a mixture of reverence and terror. Word was spreading. The galaxy was about to learn that legends were real, and they walked among them in forms far more humble than anyone had ever imagined. Marcus looked down at Luna, who was padding beside him with her tail wagging contentedly, apparently oblivious to the cosmic significance of her existence. "What have you gotten us into?" he murmured. Luna glanced up at him, and for just a moment Marcus could have sworn he saw ancient wisdom and infinite patience in those amber eyes. Whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever forces were moving against them, whatever destiny awaited them among the stars, Luna would be ready. The question was whether Marcus would be ready to stand beside her when the time came. The attack came at dawn, just as Marcus was beginning to believe that perhaps the headmaster's warnings had been overly cautious. He woke to Luna's low growl, a sound he had never heard from her before, deep, threatening, and somehow more frightening than the roar of any creature he had ever encountered. Their new quarters were located in the Academy's most secure residential tower, with reinforced walls, energy shields, and automated defense systems that could supposedly withstand assault from small armies. Marcus had spent his first night there feeling somewhat ridiculous about the elaborate security measures protecting one human cadet and his wolf. Now, as alarms began blaring throughout the building, those precautions seemed woefully inadequate. "Marcus," the voice spoke directly in his mind, and for a moment he thought it was Headmaster Krodak using his telepathic abilities. Then he realized the mental voice was younger, clearer, and unmistakably female. He looked down at Luna, who was now standing at full alert beside his bed, her silver fur seeming to shimmer with an inner light. "Luna," he whispered, "we need to move, now. The voice in his mind carried an urgency that sent adrenaline coursing through his system. They're coming for us, and these walls won't stop them. Marcus grabbed his academy uniform and started dressing rapidly. Who's coming? How are you? Questions later. Survival now. Luna moved toward the reinforced door, her posture shifting from household pet to apex predator in a single fluid motion. There are 12 infiltrators in the building, military enhancement augmentations, armed with weapons designed specifically to contain or eliminate companion beasts. The mental communication was so clear and natural that Marcus found himself accepting it without question. The strangeness of hearing Luna's voice in his thoughts paled beside the immediate threat she was describing. The Academy security has been compromised. 3 guards are dead, 5 more are unconscious. The automated systems were shut down from the inside. Luna's mental voice carried a note of grim satisfaction. They planned this well. Unfortunately for them, they planned for an ordinary wolf. The lights in their quarters suddenly went out, replaced by emergency illumination that bathed everything in a hellish red glow. Through their reinforced windows, Marcus could see similar red lights throughout the residential complex. Whatever was happening was building-wide. "Stay close to me," Luna instructed as she approached the door. "And try not to look surprised when I do things that wolves shouldn't be able to do." The door's electronic lock had been overridden, but something had welded it shut from the outside. Through the thick barrier, Marcus could hear the muffled sounds of movement in the corridor, multiple footsteps moving with military precision. Luna tilted her head slightly, as if listening to sounds beyond human perception. 6 in the hallway, 4 more coming up the emergency stairs, 2 guarding the main exits. "How can you possibly know that?" "The same way I knew exactly where to strike those void hunters yesterday," Luna replied, moving toward the window. "I can perceive the structure of reality itself. Every living being creates ripples in the fabric of space-time. I simply follow the ripples." Without warning, Luna placed one paw against the reinforced window. The transparent aluminum, designed to withstand explosions and energy weapons, simply ceased to exist. Not shattered or melted, erased as if it had never been there at all. "We're 20 stories up," Marcus protested as wind rushed into the room. Luna looked back at him with what he was beginning to recognize as gentle amusement. "Height is just another dimension. Gravity is just another force. Trust me." Before Marcus could argue, Luna leaped through the opening. He rushed to the window and looked down, expecting to see her falling toward the distant ground. Instead, she stood in midair 20 stories above the academy grounds, her fur rippling in the morning breeze as if she were standing on solid ground. "Jump," her voice whispered in his mind. "I won't let you fall." Every instinct Marcus possessed screamed against following a wolf out of a 20th-story window. But the alternative was facing 12 military infiltrators armed with anti-companion weapons, and he had seen what Luna could do when threatened. He jumped. The sensation of falling lasted exactly 1 second before he found himself standing beside Luna on what felt like solid ground, though there was nothing beneath his feet but empty air. The academy grounds spread out below them, peaceful in the early morning light despite the emergency alarms echoing from the residential towers. "Gravity manipulation?" Marcus asked, trying to keep the amazement out of his voice. "Reality manipulation," Luna corrected. "I'm simply convincing local spacetime that there happens to be a surface here for us to stand on. It's not particularly difficult once you understand that physical laws are more like guidelines than absolute rules." As they descended toward the academy grounds in a controlled fall that felt more like riding an invisible elevator, Marcus tried to process the implications of what Luna was telling him. If she could manipulate reality itself, then her demonstration yesterday had been nothing more than her showing restraint. "How powerful are you really?" he asked. Luna's mental voice carried a note of something that might have been embarrassment. "That's complicated. My abilities are theoretically unlimited, but they're constrained by certain factors. I can't simply remake the universe according to my whims." "What kind of constraints?" "The most important one is that I can only use my full power in defense of my chosen partner or in response to genuine threats to galactic stability." They touched down gently on the Academy's main courtyard, and Luna immediately began moving toward the administrative buildings. "Think of me as a safeguard, not a weapon. I exist to maintain balance, not to upset it." The courtyard was eerily quiet despite the continuing alarms. Most students would still be in their quarters, following emergency protocols that kept them safely locked away from whatever threat had triggered the Academy's security systems. Marcus and Luna moved across the open space like ghosts, Luna's abilities somehow making them effectively invisible to the security cameras tracking their location. "The infiltrators weren't after you specifically," Luna explained as they approached the central tower. "They were sent to capture any Apex companion. My demonstration yesterday merely confirmed what certain organizations had suspected for some time, that the legends were true and that Guardians were returning to the galaxy." Organizations, plural. Military research divisions, private weapon development corporations, criminal cartels seeking ultimate enforcement tools, and at least 3 governments that consider Apex companions to be strategic resources. Luna's mental tone darkened. There are also certain entities from the deep void regions who view Guardians as threats to their long-term plans. The implications sent a chill through Marcus that had nothing to do with the morning air. "You're talking about a conspiracy." "I'm talking about multiple conspiracies, all pursuing different goals, but all agreeing that beings like me cannot be allowed to operate freely." Luna paused as they reached the tower's entrance, her head tilted in concentration. "The good news is that most of them are working against each other as often as they work against us." The tower's main doors had been sealed, but Luna simply looked at them, and they opened as if responding to a recognized authority. Inside, the normally bustling administrative complex was dark and empty, filled with the eerie silence that comes when sophisticated security systems have been completely disabled. "Where are we going?" Marcus asked as Luna led them toward the central elevators. "To see the headmaster. He needs to know what we've learned about today's attack." Luna's mental voice carried a note of anticipation. "And I suspect he's been waiting for an opportunity to share certain information that he couldn't reveal while Academy security might have been compromised." The elevator responded to Luna's presence without any visible signal, carrying them smoothly to the tower's highest level. When the doors opened, they found Headmaster Krotak waiting for them in his office, his ethereal form more solid and defined than Marcus had ever seen it. "I see you survived the morning's excitement," Krotak observed, his burning gaze fixed on Luna. "I trust the experience was educational." "They were testing our responses as much as trying to capture us," Luna replied, and Marcus realized with a start that she was now speaking aloud rather than communicating telepathically. Her voice was clear, intelligent, and carried harmonics that seemed to resonate with frequencies beyond normal hearing. "Indeed," Krotak gestured for them to sit, though Luna remained standing. "The attack served multiple purposes. They learned that you are capable of far more than yesterday's demonstration suggested, that Marcus can be trusted with the truth of your nature, and that the Academy's security measures are insufficient to contain a true Guardian." Marcus felt like he was missing crucial parts of a conversation that had been going on for much longer than he had realized. "You've been expecting this." "We've been preparing for it," Krotak corrected. "The return of the Apex companions was foretold in certain ancient texts. When Luna arrived with you 2 years ago, it became clear that the time of testing was beginning." The office walls shifted to display a star map that Marcus had never seen before. Instead of showing the familiar territories of known galactic civilization, this map revealed vast regions of unexplored space filled with symbols that pulsed with ominous significance. "Something is stirring in the deep void," Krotak explained. "Ancient enemies that were defeated millennia ago are beginning to move again. The barriers that contain them are weakening, and they are sending scouts into known space." Luna moved closer to the star map, her expression growing serious. "How long do we have?" "Perhaps a year before the first major incursions," Krotak replied. "Perhaps less. The enemy is patient, but they have been preparing for this opportunity for 10,000 years. They will not waste it." Marcus stared at the star map, trying to comprehend the scope of what they were discussing. "You're talking about a galactic war." "I'm talking about something far worse than war," the headmaster replied grimly. "I'm talking about extinction. The entities stirring in the deep void do not conquer or occupy. They devour. They consume entire civilizations, leaving nothing but empty space where thriving worlds once existed." The weight of responsibility that settled on Marcus's shoulders was almost crushing. "And Luna is supposed to stop them." Luna is one of the tools that might stop them, Krotak corrected. But she cannot act alone. True guardians require partners who can help them navigate the complexities of mortal civilization, who can make the difficult choices that beings of her power cannot make for themselves. Luna turned from the star map to look directly at Marcus. The constraints I mentioned earlier, they're not just about maintaining balance. Apex companions can only use their full power in response to actions taken by their partners. We cannot initiate, we can only respond. The implication hit Marcus like a physical blow. You need me to make the decisions. I need you to be my anchor to mortality, Luna clarified. My connection to the perspectives and needs of the civilizations I exist to protect. Without that anchor, my power becomes abstract, disconnected from the reality of individual lives and choices. Marcus sank into his chair, overwhelmed by the sudden understanding of his role in cosmic events beyond his imagination. Yesterday, he had been worried about his final exams. Now, he was apparently responsible for decisions that could affect the survival of entire species. This is insane, he said quietly. Yes, Krotak agreed. But it is also necessary. The enemies we face have no concept of individual worth, no understanding of the value of mortal life. They see the universe as a resource to be consumed. Only through partnership with beings like you can guardians like Luna maintain the perspective needed to fight such entities without becoming like them. Luna patted over and rested her head on Marcus's knee, a gesture so ordinary and comforting that it helped anchor him in the midst of cosmic revelations. I chose you because you see the value in small things, she said softly. Because you defended me when everyone else saw only weakness. Because you have the courage to make difficult choices without losing sight of what makes those choices worthwhile. The office fell silent as Marcus struggled to process everything he had learned. Outside the windows, the academy grounds were beginning to show signs of normal activity as the emergency alarms finally stopped, and students were allowed to return to their routines. Life was going on, ordinary and peaceful, while cosmic forces gathered in the darkness between stars. What do we do now? He finally asked. Now you learn, Krotak replied. Both of you. Marcus, you will study strategy, leadership, and the histories of the ancient enemy. Luna, you will work with our most experienced instructors to understand the full extent of your abilities and how to use them without causing unintended consequences. The headmaster gestured, and sections of the office revealed training facilities that Marcus hadn't known existed. Chambers filled with equipment that seemed to bend the laws of physics, libraries containing texts that glowed with their own inner light, and simulation chambers that could apparently recreate any environment in known space. The Academy's true purpose has always been to prepare for the return of the ancient threat, Krotak explained. Most of our students and faculty believe they are simply learning to bond with companion beasts for personal advancement or military service. In reality, they are being prepared to serve as support personnel for the Apex companions when they return. Marcus looked around the revealed facilities with growing amazement. How long has this been planned? Since the last great devouring 10,000 years ago, Krotak replied. The survivors of that conflict established the Academy and other institutions across the galaxy, all designed to maintain knowledge and prepare for the enemy's inevitable return. Luna raised her head, her expression alert. They're stirring again. I can feel them testing the barriers between dimensions, probing for weaknesses in the fabric of reality itself. The star map on the office walls shifted, showing new areas of concern, regions where the ancient enemy was beginning to exert influence on normal space. Marcus could see the pattern forming, a slow but inexorable advance that would eventually reach the core worlds of galactic civilization. How many other Apex companions are there? He asked. Unknown, Krotak admitted. They appear when and where they are needed, often in forms so humble that their true nature goes unrecognized for years or decades. Luna's demonstration yesterday will have triggered awakening responses in any other Guardians currently in the galaxy, but we have no way of knowing how many that might be. Marcus stood up slowly, feeling the weight of destiny settling around him like a mantle he had never asked to wear. Then we need to find them. We will, Luna assured him. But first, we need to make sure you're ready for what's coming. The ancient enemy has agents and allies throughout known space, and they will not simply watch while we prepare to oppose them. As if summoned by her words, alarms began ringing again throughout the academy complex. But these were different alarms, not the security warnings of the morning, but the deep, resonant tones that signaled an incoming priority transmission from Galactic Command. Krotak's form brightened as he received the communication directly through the Academy's quantum entanglement network. When the message ended, his expression had become grimmer than Marcus had ever seen it. "What is it?" Marcus asked. "3 outer colonies have gone silent in the past 6 hours," the headmaster replied. "Complete communication blackout, no response to any attempts at contact. Survey ships are being dispatched, but—" Luna's hackles rose and a low growl rumbled from her throat. "They've begun." "The enemy?" Marcus asked, though he already knew the answer. "Not the enemy themselves," Luna corrected. "They're servants, the entities they corrupted and enslaved during the last war, now awakened and hungry after 10 millennia of dormancy." The peaceful morning had become a nightmare, and Marcus realized with crystalline clarity that his life as an ordinary academy cadet was over forever. From this moment forward, he would be fighting for the survival of everything he had ever known or cared about. The question was whether he could become strong enough, fast enough, to stand beside Luna when the darkness reached the core worlds. The answer to that question would determine the fate of the galaxy itself. The transport ship Horizon's Edge emerged from hyperspace at the coordinates of the Kepler 442 colony, and what greeted them was silence where thriving civilization should have been. Marcus stood on the bridge beside Captain Torval, a grizzled Centaurian whose 4 arms worked the ship's controls with the practiced efficiency of someone who had seen too many similar scenes. "Sensors show no life signs on the primary continent," reported Lieutenant Zexra from her station. The insectoid officer's mandibles clicked nervously as she processed the data. "No electromagnetic signatures, no thermal readings consistent with active settlements. It's like everyone just vanished." Marcus felt Luna's tension through their newly strengthened bond. In the weeks since the Academy attacks, their connection had deepened far beyond what he had thought possible. He could sense her emotions, her growing concern, and underneath it all, a carefully controlled anger that made the air around them shimmer with barely visible energy. "Life support is still functional in the primary cities," Captain Torval observed, his deep voice carrying the weight of too many similar discoveries in recent weeks. "Atmospheric processors are running, power grids are active, even the traffic control systems are operational, but there's nobody there to use any of it." This was the 7th colony they had investigated, and the pattern was always the same. No signs of struggle, no indication of evacuation, no evidence of any kind of attack. The populations had simply disappeared, leaving behind perfectly preserved cities that felt like monuments to the dead. "Permission to take a survey team to the surface," Marcus requested. Captain Torval's 4 eyes focused on him with the expression Marcus had come to recognize as protective concern mixed with resigned acceptance. The Centaurian had been briefed on Luna's true nature by Headmaster Krotak personally, and while he clearly didn't fully understand what they were dealing with, he understood enough to know that Marcus and his wolf were their best hope of learning what had happened to the missing colonists. "Granted, but you take a full security detail and you maintain constant communication with the ship." 20 minutes later, Marcus found himself standing in the central plaza of New Geneva, a colonial city that should have been bustling with the activity of 50,000 settlers. Instead, it was a perfectly preserved ghost town, with maintenance robots still going about their programmed tasks while organic life had simply ceased to exist. The security detail, 6 heavily armed academy graduates with their own powerful companion beasts, spread out to establish a perimeter. Marcus noticed that their companions were displaying the same nervous behavior he had observed in the academy dining hall. Every creature, from Sergeant Kane's massive void bear to Corporal Yith's energy-manipulating prism falcon, kept their attention focused on Luna with expressions that mixed respect and barely controlled fear. Luna padded through the empty streets with her head raised, her nostrils flaring as she tested the air for scents that no one else could detect. Through their bond, Marcus could feel her processing information on levels that had nothing to do with conventional senses. "Anything?" he asked quietly. "They were taken 3 days ago," Luna replied, her mental voice heavy with controlled fury. "The extraction process was thorough. Every living creature above a certain complexity threshold was removed." Marcus looked around at the eerily normal scene. Outdoor cafes with meals still sitting on tables, personal vehicles parked neatly along the streets, children's toys scattered in public parks. Removed how? There's no sign of any kind of struggle. That's what makes this so terrifying, Luna admitted. The entities responsible for this have learned subtlety since the last war. Before, they simply devoured everything in their path, leaving devastation that could be seen from orbit. Now they harvest populations surgically, leaving infrastructure intact for reasons we don't yet understand. The security team's communications crackled to life. "Sir, you need to see this," came Sergeant Kane's voice from several blocks away. "We've found something in the administrative district." They hurried through streets that felt like a movie set between takes, everything perfectly arranged but utterly lifeless. The administrative building that housed New Geneva's government offices was a modest structure built from local stone, designed to project stability and permanence. Inside, they found Sergeant Kane standing in front of a wall-mounted display that showed the colony's resource distribution networks. But it wasn't the normal readouts that had caught his attention. Someone had modified the display to show a message. Written in characters that seemed to shift and writhe when viewed directly, the message read, "The harvest continues. Apex GUARDIANS cannot save what has already been CONSUMED. Surrender now and your DEATHS will be swift." Luna's hackles rose as she approached the display, and Marcus could feel waves of barely controlled power radiating from her small form. The other companion beasts retreated instinctively, their own abilities insignificant compared to the forces Luna was struggling to contain. "They know we're here," she said quietly. "More than that," Marcus replied, studying the disturbing text. "They want us to know they know. This is psychological warfare." As if summoned by their words, the building's lighting system flickered and changed, casting everything in a deep red glow that made shadows seem to move independently of their sources. The temperature dropped 10 degrees in as many seconds, and frost began forming on the windows despite the warm afternoon outside. "Contact the ship," Marcus ordered. "Tell them we need immediate extraction." But when Sergeant Kane tried to activate his communicator, nothing happened. The device powered on, showed full signal strength, but produced only static when he attempted to transmit. "We're cut off," Kane reported, his voice steady despite the fear Marcus could see in his eyes. Luna moved to the center of the room, her form beginning to glow with the same silver light Marcus had seen during her demonstration at the academy. "They're here," she announced. "Not physically, but they're reaching through dimensional barriers to project their influence into this space." The walls around them began to shift and flow like liquid stone, forming new configurations that hurt to look at directly. Doorways appeared where solid barriers had been moments before, while exits that had existed seconds earlier simply ceased to be. The familiar geometry of the building twisted into patterns that seemed to exist in more than 3 dimensions. "Stay close to me," Luna instructed, her mental voice calm despite the chaos erupting around them. "Don't look directly at the spatial distortions, and whatever happens, don't touch anything that glows with dark light." Dark light, an oxymoron that somehow made perfect sense when describing the writhing tendrils of anti-illumination that were beginning to seep through the twisted walls. Where the dark light touched normal matter, that matter simply ceased to exist, leaving behind voids that the mind refused to process properly. "What are we fighting?" Marcus asked as the security team formed a defensive circle around them. "Agents of the Void Devourers," Luna replied, her form now blazing with controlled starlight. "Beings that exist in the spaces between realities, feeding on the life force of entire civilizations. They cannot manifest physically in our dimension without tremendous effort, but they can project aspects of themselves across dimensional barriers." The building continued its impossible transformation around them, walls flowing like water while maintaining their solidity, floors becoming ceilings while somehow remaining underfoot. The very concept of architectural logic was being systematically violated by forces that operated according to geometries that predated physical law. Through the chaos, figures began to emerge from the twisted walls, humanoid shapes made of crystallized shadow and negative energy. They moved with predatory grace, their forms constantly shifting between states of matter that should have been mutually exclusive. The colonists, Marcus realized with horror, these things were people. "They were," Luna confirmed, her mental voice heavy with sorrow. The Void Devourers don't simply kill their victims. They transform them into extensions of their own will, corrupting their life force into something that can exist partially outside normal reality. The transformed colonists began to advance, their movements unnaturally coordinated as they flowed around obstacles that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Where they stepped, the floor became something other than floor, still solid enough to support weight, but wrong in ways that made the mind recoil. Luna stepped forward to meet them, and reality rippled around her like disturbed water. Her form expanded beyond the boundaries of normal space, becoming something that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously while remaining recognizably the wolf Marcus had bonded with years earlier. The battle that followed occurred on levels of reality that human senses could barely process. Luna moved through the transformed colonists like light through prisms, each contact causing them to dissolve back into the basic energy patterns from which they had been corrupted. But instead of destroying them, she was somehow restoring them to their original states, not bringing them back to life, but allowing their consciousness to find peace instead of eternal service to alien hunger. Marcus watched in amazement as his companion fought not just with power, but with compassion, treating each corrupted victim as a soul to be saved rather than an enemy to be destroyed. It was the most beautiful and terrible thing he had ever witnessed. But even Luna's incredible abilities had limits. For every colonist she restored, two more emerged from the twisted architecture around them. The building had become a portal, allowing the Void Devourers to channel more corruption into normal space with each passing moment. "We need to leave," Marcus said. "Now." "The portal has to be closed first," Luna replied, her mental voice strained with effort. "If we abandon this position, the corruption will spread to other colonies, other worlds. Millions more will be transformed." Marcus looked around at the impossible geometry surrounding them, at the security team struggling to maintain formation while reality bent and twisted around their position, at the endless stream of corrupted souls flowing through dimensional barriers that should not have existed. The decision was his to make. Luna could act in response to his choices, but she could not make those choices for him. The weight of cosmic responsibility that Headmaster Krotak had warned him about settled on his shoulders like a physical burden. "How do we close it?" Luna's form blazed brighter, her silver radiance pushing back the dark light that sought to consume everything it touched. "I need you to anchor me to this reality while I reach across dimensions to sever the connection at its source." "But Marcus," her mental voice carried a note of desperate urgency, "if I extend myself that far, I won't be able to protect you from what's happening in normal space. You and the security team will have to hold this position without me." The implications hit Marcus like a sledgehammer. Luna was asking him to trust her completely while she became temporarily unavailable, leaving him to face forces that had consumed entire colonies with nothing but conventional weapons and ordinary companion beasts. It was exactly the kind of impossible choice she had warned him he would have to make. "Do it," he said. Luna's physical form became translucent as her consciousness expanded across dimensional barriers, reaching toward the source of corruption that existed in spaces between realities. The silver light that surrounded her began to pulse in patterns that seemed to resonate with fundamental frequencies of existence itself. Around Marcus, the twisted building continued its transformation, reality bending into configurations that violated basic physical laws. The security team opened fire with weapons designed to harm creatures of living energy, but their attacks passed harmlessly through enemies that existed partially outside normal spacetime. "Conventional weapons are useless," Sergeant Kane reported, his voice tight with controlled fear. "Our ammunition just passes right through them." Marcus drew the sidearm he had been issued for the mission, knowing it would be just as useless as the heavy weapons the security team carried. But as his fingers closed around the grip, he felt something unexpected, a warmth that spread up his arm and into his chest, a connection to Luna's power that he had never experienced before. Through their bond, he could feel her consciousness stretched across impossible distances, wrestling with entities that existed in dimensions where mathematics broke down and logic became meaningless. She was fighting a battle that occurred in abstract concepts rather than physical space, struggling to sever connections that bound colony worlds to alien hunger. And somehow, some small fraction of her power was flowing through their bond into him. Marcus raised his weapon and fired at the nearest corrupted colonist. Instead of the expected energy bolt, his weapon discharged something that looked like crystallized starlight. The projectile struck the shadow creature and spread through its form like benevolent infection, restoring the twisted patterns of its existence to something approaching their original configuration. The corrupted being stopped its advance, looked directly at Marcus with eyes that briefly held human recognition, and spoke a single word, "Thank you." Then it dissolved into motes of peaceful light that drifted away like wind-blown dust. Around the room, the security team stared in amazement as Marcus began systematically restoring the corrupted colonists, his impossible ammunition turning Luna's compassionate healing into something that could be projected through conventional weapons. But even as they fought, more enemies poured through the dimensional portal, and the building's architecture continued its slide into geometries that belonged to spaces outside normal reality. They were winning individual battles while losing the war, holding their ground against forces that could reinforce indefinitely. Then Luna's mental voice reached him across the barriers between dimensions, carrying triumph and exhaustion in equal measure. "It's done, the primary portal is severed, but Marcus—" Her voice faded as her consciousness snapped back into normal spacetime, her physical form solidifying with visible effort. "There are dozens more. This was just one harvesting operation among many." The twisted building began to return to normal architecture as the dimensional distortions faded, walls resuming their proper angles, while floors and ceilings sorted themselves back into logical relationships. The remaining corrupted colonists dissolved peacefully as the energy sustaining their transformation was cut off from its source. Within minutes, they were standing in an ordinary administrative building in an empty colonial city, surrounded by the evidence of a battle that conventional sensors would never be able to detect. Marcus holstered his weapon, still trying to understand what had just happened. "We saved this world." "We saved this world," Luna agreed, her form still glowing faintly with residual power. "But there are hundreds more under threat, and we can't be everywhere at once." The communication static cleared as normal space reasserted itself, and Sergeant Kane's radio crackled to life with urgent transmissions from the orbiting ship. "Ground team, respond immediately. We're receiving distress signals from 3 more colony worlds. Whatever happened down there, it's happening elsewhere too." Marcus looked at Luna, seeing his own grim determination reflected in her amber eyes. They had won their first real battle against the ancient enemy, but it was becoming clear that this was only the beginning of a war that would span the galaxy. The Void Devourers were no longer content to probe and test. They had begun the true harvest. And somewhere among the stars, other Apex companions were awakening to face the same impossible choices that Marcus and Luna had just survived. The Galactic Council chamber had never hosted a meeting quite like this one. Representatives from every major civilization sat in stunned silence as holographic displays showed the scope of the crisis they faced. 47 colonies had gone dark in the past week alone, while reconnaissance missions reported impossible phenomena at the edges of known space, regions where stars were being systematically extinguished, where space itself seemed to be unraveling. Marcus stood beside Luna at the center of the vast chamber, feeling the weight of 1,000 alien gazes focused on them. Around the circular gallery, beings from across the galaxy struggled to process the reality of what they were witnessing. The same wolf who had been dismissed as an ordinary pet just weeks earlier now commanded the attention of the most powerful entities in known civilization. "The entity you call Luna represents our best hope of understanding the threat we face," announced Chancellor Vorthak, the ancient crystalline whose form refracted light in patterns that hurt to observe directly. "She has agreed to share with us what she knows of our enemy's capabilities and intentions." Luna stepped forward, her silver fur gleaming under the chamber's exotic lighting. When she spoke, her voice resonated through dimensions that bypassed normal hearing, reaching directly into the minds of every being present regardless of their species or communication methods. 10,000 years ago, my people fought a war against entities that exist in the void between realities," she began, her mental voice carrying harmonics of ancient sorrow and unbreakable determination. "We called them the Devourers, though their true nature is difficult to translate into concepts your languages can express. They are not alive in any sense you would understand, yet they hunger with an appetite that spans dimensions." The holographic displays shifted to show astronomical data that made several representatives gasp in recognition. Star charts revealed the systematic disappearance of entire systems along the galactic rim, while deep space sensors recorded gravitational anomalies that suggested the presence of masses far larger than any known celestial objects. They consume not just matter and energy, but the fundamental patterns that allow reality to maintain coherence, Luna continued. Worlds they devour don't just die, they cease to have ever existed. The barriers between dimensions weaken where they feed, allowing their influence to spread into spaces that should be immune to their hunger. Emperor Kethnos of the Meridian Hegemony leaned forward in his floating throne, his electrical field crackling with barely controlled anxiety. You speak of them as if they've returned from some kind of exile. Where have they been during the past 10 millennia? Contained, Luna replied simply. The last war ended not with their destruction. They cannot be destroyed by any force we understand, but with their imprisonment in pocket dimensions designed to hold them until the universe itself aged beyond their ability to survive. A collective murmur ran through the assembly as the implications became clear. Several representatives began speaking at once, their various languages creating a cacophony of alarm and disbelief. Chancellor Vorthak called for order, his crystalline form pulsing with authority. You're saying the barriers that contain them are failing. Not failing, Luna corrected, and Marcus felt her emotional state through their bond, a mixture of ancient guilt and terrible understanding. They're being deliberately weakened by agents who have spent millennia working to free their masters. The silence that followed this revelation was absolute. Marcus could feel the weight of galactic civilization's horror as beings who had lived for centuries or millennia tried to process the concept of a conspiracy that spanned longer than recorded history. The harvesting of colony worlds serves multiple purposes, Luna explained, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had witnessed these events before. The Devourers need enormous quantities of life force to power their escape from imprisonment. But more importantly, they need to corrupt enough reality around each breach point to allow their full forms to emerge into normal space. Prime Minister Yaxtel of the Insectoid Concordat clicked her mandibles in a pattern that translated as deep concern. How many more colonies will they need to consume before achieving this goal? Luna's form flickered slightly as she accessed knowledge that existed beyond normal memory. Based on the current rate of consumption and the energy signatures we've detected, they need to harvest approximately 300 more worlds to generate sufficient dimensional instability. At their current pace, they will achieve this within 6 months. The mathematical certainty of extinction hit the assembly like a physical force. Marcus watched as beings who commanded star fleets and ruled entire sectors realized that their vast technological achievements meant nothing against an enemy that operated outside the basic laws of physics. What about the other Apex companions? Asked Ambassador Zerintel, her insected form trembling with barely controlled fear. Luna cannot be the only guardian remaining in the galaxy. There are others, Luna confirmed, and Marcus felt a surge of hope through their bond. 5 have awakened in response to the current crisis, but awakening is not the same as being ready to fight. Each guardian must learn to work with their chosen partner, and each partnership must develop the level of trust and coordination necessary to face entities that exist partially outside normal spacetime. Luna gestured, and the holographic displays showed star charts marked with points of light scattered across known space. Guardian Tempest has bonded with a Vorthan military commander and is currently defending the Outer Rim territories. Guardian Prism works with a human scientist to develop new forms of dimensional shielding. Guardian Echo has chosen a young crystalline who shows promise in temporal manipulation. Marcus noticed that Luna didn't mention the 5th Guardian, and he could sense through their bond that there was something troubling about that particular awakening. What about the 5th? Chancellor Vorthak asked, apparently noticing the same omission. Luna's expression grew troubled. Guardian Shadow has awakened but has not yet found a suitable partner. Without that bond, Shadow's abilities remain largely inaccessible. Worse, an unpartnered Guardian in a crisis situation can become unstable. The implications sent a chill through the assembly. If Apex companions were weapons capable of reshaping reality, then an unstable Guardian represented a threat that might rival the Devourers themselves. Can the 5 partnered Guardians defeat this threat? asked Fleet Admiral Kothar, his massive form shifting uneasily in the chamber designed to accommodate beings of various sizes and environmental needs. Unknown, Luna admitted with uncomfortable honesty. The last war required 17 Guardian partnerships working in perfect coordination. We have 5 partnerships of varying levels of development. The mathematics are concerning.